Excalibur number 12 is the first Prelude chapter of X of Swords, apart from the free comic book day teaser, and a direct lead-in to Prelude Part 2 and X-Men number 12. Impressively, the event kickoff is the logical conclusion of the story Tini Howard, Marcus Toe, and the creative team have been weaving since issue number 1, a story that is coming together in some exciting ways for the 2020 X-Men event. Today I'll answer, what are Apocalypse's big picture plans? How do the Externals, no, not the Eternals, fit into the Big A's schemes? And did Gambit make the right call, trusting Apocalypse? I'm Dave Busing, founder and editor-in-chief of Comic Book Herald. You are listening to Krakin Krakoa number 89. If you like the Comic Book Herald YouTube channel or Krakin Krakoa, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing. This weekend, an announcement. Coming up on Saturday, starting around 10:45 Central Time, I will be hosting a live Ten of Swords prediction party here on the Comic Book Herald YouTube channel. I'm going to be having on Blurred Without Fear, popular YouTube channel here that I recommend everybody check out, and the Cerebros podcast, which you should check out as well. So I'll have some more announcements coming, but get ready for that. Otherwise, spoilers for discussed comics may follow. Writer Tini Howard, art by Marcus II, colors Erick Arciniega, letters by Ariana Maher. Apocalypse gathers the Externals to Krakoa. There's a nice callback here to House of X number 5 with a panel of Apocalypse, Kandra, and Selene walking through the Krakoan gates invited for the first time. It gives the implication, or at least the sense, that these seeds have been planted for some time now, which I quite appreciate. Apocalypse compares the Externals, of which he is one, to the new status quo of all mutants on Krakoa. Here's a quote. Now they have become as powerful as we have always been. As a whole, as one. It's really interesting to consider the idea that these Externals are these immortal mutants that live throughout time. They can, basically the features that they have that kind of make them special, resurrection, the fact that they can live forever, the fact that they have these mutant power sets, all of that is now kind of replicated in Krakoa. And throughout the comic, Apocalypse is championing survival of community as the ultimate triumph, which is really interesting. It's a shift for the character who for so many years was defined through survival of the fittest. Now it's kind of this survival of the community. The idea still stands, but the scope and scale have definitely increased. I definitely have credit here. Tini Howard does a nice job summarizing the often very messy Externals. I was definitely very glad on my end to have recently dug deep into Externals history because I don't think this issue, and to a degree the preceding Excalibur number 11, would have hit nearly as hard without that backdrop. So I'd recommend checking out the Krakin Krakoa coverage of the Externals for more on this. You can find that in Excalibur number 11 review. But as the data page lays out, the Externals are immortal mutants. Their group of High Lords is eternally connected through endless resurrection and a mysterious shared connection that they all share. A big thing here that comes up is like when some of them die, the remaining Externals, they retain that energy, so they actually become more and more powerful, which is why a lot of times when the Externals are in play, there's a plot by one of them, Selene and Gideon have been guilty of this, of killing off all the others to then create this almost godlike power for themselves, and that's actually a little bit of what Apocalypse is playing with here. So Apocalypse brings Richter free from his incomplete Krakoan gate from Otherworld, which is where we left off in Excalibur 11, and reveals he already has Externals Selene and Gideon, aka the two most interesting non-Apocalypse Externals, already on his side, right? So they're in on this coup, they're in on this scheme to otherwise take out the remaining Externals. Absalom, he gets roasted by Richter, who's doing this really cool Krakoa's for all mutants fire blast thing. He gets kept alive just because they need his energies. Richter gets a really interesting level up here as Apocalypse's chosen favorite since he got what he needed out of Rogue at the end of Excalibur's first arc, right? He's really been into Richter ever since, and he roasts these Externals who are not willing to sacrifice themselves for Apocalypse's notions of community, setting the stage for Apocalypse's ultimate plan. As always, I dig the use of data page to deliver Apocalypse's grimoire, here explaining how he'll use the sacrificed Externals' energies to power up the remaining Externals and power a permanent gate to Otherworld, specifically to Saturnine's Starlight Citadel. It sounds like basically this will take them right inside what would otherwise be a fortified, difficult to get into place. Because we're 12 issues in to Excalibur, it's easy to overlook, but there's a brilliance to Howard and Company's interest in Apocalypse as the head of mutant magic. I've been plenty critical of the book when it's not working for me, which has been, every other issue, it feels like. But when it hits, like it does here with the Externals plot, again, a group in Marvel history that I barely cared about prior to researching a lot, for Excalibur number 11, it's a really cool expansion of the Marvel Universe. Like, all of the seeds coming together in this issue as Apocalypse's plans that we've been seeing build since issue number 1, as all this external stuff that seemed like, well, where's that going to go? And then immediately delivering on it in a really cool way. That's a nice job that they're doing here in this prelude to Ten of Swords. Back on Otherworld in the Starlight Citadel, Gambit has stolen Kandra, one of the externals' gem, which she has put her life force energies into. Now, this actually touches back, and this is one of my favorite things about Excalibur. Like, it's pulling from lots and lots of continuity and X-Men stories that are rarely discussed. Like, these are minor things, and I reference all these in the previous Excal 11 review, but it's like Kandra putting her life force energies into a gem. That's from like a late 90s X-Men comic. Gambit having a relationship, having a deal with Kandra, that's from his solo series in the early 2000s, right? So all these things play on Marvel history in some really fun ways. And what it leads to is, well, one, because Gambit stole this gem last time, Apocalypse doesn't have the energy he needs to finish his plans, and Kandra then appears as this kind of sultry ghost to good old Remy, putting him in the position of having to decide, do I protect Kandra, who he does not care for, or do I help Apocalypse, who he does not trust at all? Saturnine, other things going on in Otherworld, Saturnine deeply distrusts Betsy as Captain Britain, particularly because she's a mutant, and that leads to fear and hate. This concern that Betsy will ultimately have to choose whether her allegiance is to Krakoa or Britain mirrors earlier moments in Howard's run, where Betsy is trying to convince British leaders of her new loyal standing as the nation's Captain Britain, being doubted both as a woman and especially as a mutant. I'll admit, I don't really get why this matters to Saturnine, who has much bigger concerns as protector of the Omniverse. Now, the way she frames it is that, it's not necessarily Betsy's mutanthood that bothers her so much as the fact that England will turn on her, which presumably is kind of connected to the source of her powers and that sort of thing. But Saturnine has, again, she mentions, I've seen all sorts of reality and fear and hate win too often. Fair enough, but she's also seen all sorts of reality where, like, there's all sorts of weird aliens and different, types of creatures and things, and that hasn't led to a problem here as well. So she's seen a lot. The fact that the Captain Britain would be a mutant to me seems like it would be far from the weirdest thing she's ever seen in the Omniverse. So all of this builds to Gambit's decision, which is he decides, all right, I can get at Apocalypse later. Right now, I got to get Kandra out of my head because she's making me, make it look like I'm back talking Rogue, and that's not going to end well for me. So he throws the gem through the Krakoan gate to Apocalypse, which allows them to complete their ritual and build this permanent Krakoan gate to Otherworld, and specifically, it sounds like, to the Starlight Citadel. So Apocalypse gets what he's after. I do think, like, Remy's the only one on Excalibur right now who is really distrustful of Apocalypse. I mean, Richter is definitely, like, working with him. Psylocke, Rogue. I mean, they all are definitely, like, they have the appearance of agency, but Gambit's got a suspicion that maybe Apocalypse has kind of got his claws into all of them, in maybe more literal ways than not. So for him to trust it just as far as he can throw this gem, Apocalypse, to build this gate, I think we're going to see Gambit in these comics as we get to X of Swords. We know betrayals are coming in this X-Men event. Apocalypse obviously being at the center of it, and this is a big thing we're going to talk about in the X-Men number 12 review coming up, which is the second part of this prelude. This event's going to be very focused on Apocalypse, and I think Gambit's going to have a huge role to play in kind of mitigating potential Apocalypse betrayals if that is the direction the story goes. So at the end of the day, this prelude is pretty good. I mean, definitely, like, I do think you have to have been paying attention throughout Excalibur for it to pay off. And I also think the history of the externals, which is not something that I brought to the Dawn of X, just as knowledge that I walked around with in my day-to-day, goes a long way to making this comic a lot more interesting to me, at the very least. So I think if you have those things, if you're invested in the comic and invested in the Dawn of X, this prelude part 1 is a nice kind of it's a nice coda. It's a nice, like, finishing touch put on the work Howard and Toe have been doing building to this point. I think one of the coolest things about Excalibur is that the book has been an event lead-in since Jump, right? Like, the book has been a build to Ten of Swords since Excalibur launched, and that actually makes it very unique in this way that kind of the rest of the Dawn of X doesn't have. So it's interesting to me. It's, again, like, it's definitely an imperfect book. I was not into the first arc hardly at all. The second arc won me over a handful of times. With some very good comics, I would place Excalibur number 12 among their lot. Again, part of this too is, like, I'm super excited for Ten of Swords. I think this event is going to be awesome. I think this is going to be a great comic. So there's definitely like that fan part of me that is wishing. I'm wishing this comic well. I want it to be good. So I'm curious, what do you think? What do you think of this story? What do you think of this build to Ten of Swords? What do you think about Apocalypse's plans? Obviously, there's going to be more of that conversation in the next Krakin Krakoa on X-Men number 12. But let me know in the comments. Let me know your theories. Let me know what you think of all this content, and let's have a conversation. So thanks as always to everybody for listening. Patreon support for Comic Book Herald is over at patreon.com/Comic Book Herald. If you like the site or Krakin Krakoa, you can help me out by jumping over there and considering chipping in a few bucks if you are so inclined. The other best way that you can support Comic Book Herald endeavors is please consider liking and subscribing to Comic Book Herald YouTube channel. That helps me a lot and encourages me to keep making Krakin Krakoa videos. Otherwise, I'm Dave. You can find my stuff at comicbookherald.com, at Comic Book Herald, pretty much anywhere online. Look for the best comics ever and My Marvelous Year podcast for more. But thanks everybody for listening. I'm looking forward to the comments here and some theories. And as always, enjoy the comment. Enjoy the comments? Well, I hope you do that too, but enjoy the comics.